You're here because you either just got back from a doctor's visit that scared you, or you've been struggling with high blood pressure for a while now. This video isn't just theory or data that's proven in the research. This is also insight from my personal experience lowering my blood pressure by building healthy habits and losing over 80 pounds, as well as the insight that I've gained over the last 6 years helping other people do the same. And I'll cite all the research and the studies down in the description if you want to dive into it yourself. My intention for this video is to make this complex topic as simple and easy to understand as possible for you. If you feel like you don't need an overview of high blood pressure, feel free to skip down to the section where we go over the methods, which I'll have timestamp for you. Hypertension is the medical term for high blood pressure, and it's known as the silent killer. If you didn't know that, it's because there's typically no symptoms until it's too late, which eventually lead to stroke, clogged arteries, heart disease, kidney disease, and more. And I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to educate you and empower you. So let's get into it. To understand hypertension, you need to understand how your blood circulates through your body and how blood pressure rises. For blood to flow, it needs to push against the walls of your blood vessels as your heart pumps it through your body all day, like water flowing through a hose. And it's a balance between two things: how much blood is being pumped out and how easy it is to flow through your body. And you see it measured in two numbers. When your heart beats, it pushes blood out and then your blood pressure rises. That's your top number, or your systolic blood pressure. And when your heart relaxes between beats, your blood pressure lowers. And that's your bottom number, which is your diastolic blood pressure. Now, both of these numbers matter, but that top number is actually a stronger predictor of cardiovascular disease risk, especially after the age of 50, because as you age, your arteries or your blood vessels start to stiffen up, and so they can't absorb that pressure wave when the heart beats as well as they could before. A healthy blood pressure is below 120/80. So now, what exactly is hypertension? It's just when your blood pressure is always too high, which makes your heart and your blood vessels work harder. And there's a lot of things that influence your blood pressure, but here are the four biggest ones. Number one is stress. This is a big one because when you're stressed out and in this fight or flight response, your blood vessels start to constrict or they get smaller and your heart rate goes up, which means it's pumping more. Now, this is a natural response and this is a good thing when you need the energy to run away from a dragon. But if you're just stressed out sitting at your desk all day, that's not so good. So take some deep breaths, chill out a bit. If there's things in your life that are super stressful, try to eliminate them. Get out in nature, maybe you even get a dog. Second one is fluid and hormone balance. And this is another big driver of blood pressure because your kidneys, your electrolyte levels, and certain hormones, they're like knobs on your pressure control system. And remember this, water follows sodium. So when you're holding on to more sodium, you're also going to be holding on to more water. And when there's more fluid in the pipes, there's more pressure. It's like when you blow up a balloon. The more air you push through, the more pressure that there is. And some people are more sensitive to sodium, so they hold more of it, which means their blood pressure rises compared to other people, which is why health and fitness is so individualized. Number three is blood vessel health. Healthy blood vessels are stretchy, they're clean, they're smooth, and they're responsive. But over time, with aging, poor diet, activity levels, smoking, stress, they change in three major ways. They start to get stiffer. Healthy blood vessels are like new socks. They're elastic, they stretch out, but then they snap back into place. On the flip side, unhealthy ones, they can't stretch, they can't absorb pressure. They're like an old worn out sock that doesn't snap back into place. They also get gunked up by plaque buildup, which narrows the space that the blood can flow through. It's kind of like when a pipe gets rusted. That makes the heart work harder to push that blood through, and they lose their ability to relax. And so they stay slightly tighter and narrow, which keeps blood pressure high even at rest. The last one is lifestyle. Some people are just born with a natural higher baseline of blood pressure, which means they need to be so much more intentional about all of these things that we talked about, which isn't fair. But that's life sometimes, and we just got to play the cards that we've been dealt. That being said, there is so much that is in your control when it comes to blood pressure, and it's better to focus on the things that you can control as opposed to staying stuck in thinking about all of the things that we don't have control over. And lifestyle actually accounts for most cases of primary or essential hypertension, meaning you have the power to make this improvement. All right, let's go over natural ways that you can lower your blood pressure. So now you got a little bit of background, a little bit of education. Now this section is going to be the application. what you can do and what you can start implementing into your life. First, let's talk about caffeine. Everyone loves a little bit of caffeine. I love caffeine. Now, specifically, the caffeine that's in coffee and teas can raise your blood pressure temporarily, especially if you haven't or you don't drink caffeine often. But for regular coffee drinkers, the body usually adapts. And large population studies show that there is no significant link between moderate caffeine intake and hypertension. And they define moderate caffeine intake as 2 to 4 cups of coffee a day. On the other hand, energy drinks are a different story. And it's because they usually combine a high dose of caffeine with other stimulants like taurine on top of sugar if you're not having the sugar-free versions. And that combo raises blood pressure higher and it stays elevated for longer. So if you already have high blood pressure or other heart risks, it's wise to avoid or at least limit energy drinks. If you're healthy and you moderate your intake, your risk is lower, but it's still worth keeping in mind. So overall, with caffeine, if your blood pressure is already high, or you're sensitive to caffeine, or you're pounding 3 to 4 energy drinks a day, cutting back will help. But for most people, your morning cup of coffee isn't the problem. It's everything else that we'll talk about next that all add up. And I think those should be your main focus. Something as simple as losing 1 kilogram or about 2 pounds can lower your blood pressure by 1 point, both systolic and diastolic. And this was found to be independent of any other factors, which means without changing anything else, just simply losing weight can help lower your blood pressure. And to put this into some context, here are the stats when you lower your systolic or your top blood pressure by 10 points. You lower your chance of having a major cardiovascular disease event by 20%. You lower your risk of coronary heart disease by 17. You lower your risk of stroke by 27%. You lower your risk of heart failure by 28%. And you lower all-cause mortality by 13%. If you could reduce your risk of having a stroke or having a heart attack by this much, wouldn't you take it? Helping people lose weight and get healthy is what I do for a living. If you want someone to take out all of the guesswork when it comes to your nutrition and your activity, check out the first link in the description where you can apply for online coaching. And if you want to continue trying this on your own, the second link in the description will be my fat loss calorie calculator, and it'll give you a good starting point. All right, next, let's talk about physical activity. This one is pretty straightforward, but there's still some surprising approaches to this. Generally, if you can find something that gets your body moving, that can elevate your heart rate for a prolonged period of time, and that you enjoy, that's amazing. It could be taking classes or dancing, hiking, swimming, walking, lifting weights, whatever it is. But the studies break this down into 3 different categories, which is what we'll do. And you can either do one of them or a combination of 2 or all. There's no rules here. First category is going to be aerobic or endurance training. The second one is going to be dynamic resistance training. And the last one is going to be isometric resistance training. And that's the one that surprised me the most when I looked into the research. So with that being said, let's start with the isometric training. Studies show that isometric training have the strongest blood pressure lowering effect per minute of effort compared to aerobic or cardio and lifting weights. So what exactly is isometric training? It's just creating tension in your muscles without movement. You're holding onto a position. With traditional lifting, you're moving a weight through a range of motion. With isometric, you're not having any movement. So think of doing a plank or a wall sit or even just gripping something. And the plank, the wall sit, and the hand grip are the 3 things that they tested in the studies. And that's amazing news because you don't need a gym, you don't need fancy equipment, you don't need any of that to do this. So how do we approach it? If I could just squeeze something a few times a week and lower my blood pressure significantly, I mean, it's a no-brainer. All of these were done 3 times per week with 4 sets of 2 minutes of work. So how to set up the hand grip, you're gonna sit upright in a chair, have your back supported, both feet flat on the floor, elbows bent at a 90-degree angle, resting comfortably on an armrest or the side of your body. And you wanna have your thumbs facing up like you're doing a handshake. And you wanna squeeze about 1/3 of your hardest. So you're squeezing firm, but you're not death gripping this thing. It should be a consistent and steady squeeze the whole time. And I'll leave a link to the hand grip that I bought off of Amazon down in the description so you can pick one up for yourself. Now let's go over how to set up the wall sit. For the wall sit, you're gonna stand with your back against the wall, feet about 2 feet away from the wall, and you're gonna slide down until your knees are bent at roughly 90 degrees. You want your thighs to be parallel to the floor. Keep your knees directly above your ankles, not over your toes, and keep your hands off your thighs. Place them at your side or even cross them over your chest. Keep your head and shoulders relaxed, core brace, and heels on the ground. You're gonna hold this until your legs are shaking or when you're near your limit while keeping your form good still. And gradually work your way up to this, especially if you're going to be doing the wall sits. You're probably not going to be able to do the full 2 minutes. You might not even be able to get all the way down to a 90-degree angle. Do what you can and work your way up. That's totally fine. But just know that eventually the goal is to be able to get parallel for 2 minutes. The studies show that doing these things 3 times a week can lower blood pressure by about 8 to 10 points. That's similar to medication. When you compare all of these things together, again, the biggest blood pressure drop comes from the static holds, closely followed by a mix of cardio and strength training. Now let's talk about aerobic or endurance training. Just think of that as cardio. Just 30 minutes of moderate activity 5 to 7 days a week is shown to reduce your blood pressure by around 5 to 7 points. So how intense does this activity need to be? You want to be breathing heavy, but you could still hold the conversation. It's known as the talk test. So again, you're breathing heavy. You could talk to someone that's near you, but you don't necessarily want to talk. Now let's cover dynamic strength training. This could be done with dumbbells, barbells, bands, body weights, anything. And it's to be done 2 to 3 days a week. Strength training helps your blood vessels stay flexible and improves your ability to handle stress, blood sugar, and sodium levels. The key is consistency, not intensity. You don't have to destroy yourself in the gym, just move more days than you don't. Because what's really happening is your heart is getting stronger and your blood vessels are becoming more elastic over time. And that means your system is literally working smoother and under less pressure. Now, when you combine aerobic training with strength training, it's shown to have the best long-term effect. But here's the thing, each type hit different pathways. And when you combine them, a little bit of walking, a little bit of lifting, a little bit of isometric training, you get the biggest bang for your buck. All right, next is electrolyte balance. The main ones we're going to talk about are sodium, potassium, and magnesium. Typically, you're going to want to lower sodium and increase potassium and magnesium. When you reduce your sodium, you reduce the volume in your bloodstream. Remember what we talked about before? More sodium means more water, which leads to more pressure. So lowering your sodium is like letting a little bit of air out on an overinflated tire. Now, why we want to increase potassium is because it helps you pee out the sodium, which means it flushes it out. It also improves endothelial function, which is basically the health of the lining of your blood vessels. And that's going to help them stay flexible instead of stiff. And it also helps your blood vessels relax. When your blood vessels are relaxed, that means the blood can flow through it easier and your heart doesn't have to work as hard to pump that through. And why we want to increase magnesium, it's very similar to potassium. It helps your blood vessels relax so your blood can flow through easier. And even though these things are so essential, about 40% of Americans are deficient in magnesium. Now you know how these three minerals affect your blood pressure. How do you actually apply that? When it comes to sodium, most of it isn't coming from your salt shaker at home. It's actually from packaged foods and meals eaten out. But this doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. Most people who eat out all the time and then all of a sudden say, I'm not going to eat out anymore, that usually lasts about a week. So instead of that, start small. If you're eating out every single day, can you start to reduce that amount to maybe 3 times a week? 4 times a week? That alone can drop your sodium levels to about 1,000 milligrams per day, and that adds up fast. Something that you can do at home that's an easy swap is to use potassium fortified salt or salt substitutes to season your food. If you've never heard of those things, yes, that's a thing. They taste similar to regular salt, but part of it or all of it is made from potassium and not sodium. So you're lowering your sodium intake and increasing your potassium intake at the same time. And just a little disclaimer, check with your doctor first if you have kidney issues or you're taking medications like ACE inhibitors or spironolactone before you start taking potassium fortified products, just because there could be some complications if you get too much of it. All right, so one side of a coin, we want to reduce our sodium. The other side is we want to increase our potassium and magnesium. And you don't need to go out and spend all of your money on supplements to do this. So here's how you can do it by starting to include more whole natural foods into your diet. Include things like leafy greens, beans and lentils, potatoes, sweet potatoes, yogurt, nuts and seeds, avocados, bananas, oranges, and salmon and sardines. You could pause the video here so you can read it, maybe take some notes, but the main takeaway from this slide is knowing what types of foods to start including into your diet. So instead of obsessing over all of the things you need to start cutting out of your life, start thinking about it like, what are the things I need to add into my diet to start making these improvements? Even if all you did was start to include some of these foods into your daily rotation, you'll start to make improvements. Next, let's talk about the DASH diet. If you want to look more in depth into the DASH diet, I'll leave a link down in the description to the homepage of the DASH diet eating plan by the NIH. All right, so DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, and it's one of the most proven eating patterns to help reduce blood pressure naturally. The diet has shown significant results in clinical trials, but unfortunately, when they look at people in their own home, in their own environment, the adherence to the plan is just so low. And that's a major problem. But I think it's because most people don't learn healthy eating habits and behaviors. So when they're taking on this new lifestyle, they don't know how to approach it properly. And when they're expected to go all in with this new lifestyle, it's just so overwhelming, which is why most people fall off. And when you combine that with this all or nothing mentality that most people have, it's no surprise why people have a hard time sticking with this on top of all of the other responsibilities responsibilities that they have in their lives. You might just not know how to fit this into your life and your schedule. It's not a diet in the sense of a fad, it's more of an eating pattern, and that includes a lot of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean protein sources like chicken and fish, low-fat dairy like yogurt, nuts and seeds, and very minimal added sugar, processed foods, and salty snacks. And lastly, we'll talk about smoking and alcohol because they both raise blood pressure. Every time you smoke, even just one cigarette, your heart rate will go up almost immediately for about 15 to 30 minutes. And that's because nicotine activates your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response, your stressed out mode. And again, it's because your arteries start to narrow and your heart starts to pump harder. And over time, that constant stress on your blood vessels can start to damage them, to stiffen them up, which will then raise your blood pressure. The good news is that your body will start to heal almost right away when you quit. So within 20 minutes, your blood pressure and your heart rate will start to normalize. Within 2 to 12 weeks, your circulation starts to improve. And after 1 year, your risk of heart disease drops by about 50%. And I want to point this out. It's not necessarily the smoke itself. Yes, it is more harmful in that way, but it's also the nicotine that's in there. And nicotine pouches like Zins and vaping is becoming so popular. And because the nature of those things, they can be done much more frequently than smoking. And that means your blood pressure is constantly being spiked throughout the day and never getting time to relax. So while cigarettes contain many other additional toxins from the smoke, these nicotine products that don't produce smoke aren't harmless, especially if you already have high blood pressure. So just keep that in mind. So what about drinking alcohol? And the studies show that having anything above 1 to 2 drinks a day start to raise your average blood pressure. And the effect is dose dependent, meaning the more that you drink, the higher that it goes. So what's considered a safe range? Up to 1 drink per day for women and 2 for men. And they define a drink meaning 5 ounces of wine, 12 ounces of beer, or 1.5 ounces of spirit. But if we're being honest, for blood pressure control, less is better. And it's not just the alcohol itself that you need to think about. It's all of the things that lead up after it. It's getting a poor night of sleep, which leads to poor health. It leads to lower energy levels, which means you don't feel like working out or getting active the next day. On top of that, your poor sleep leads to higher cravings, higher hunger levels, meaning you're going to want to eat more. And don't get me started about the drunchies that you have while you're drinking. It all just kind of snowballs, and that's why health and fitness isn't just about the physiology. It's also about human behavior. And that's why I always say the perfect plan on paper means absolutely nothing if we can't improve your thoughts, your behaviors, or your habits. Now let's go over the ways that you can measure your blood pressure so you stay on top of these things. The first one is just going to a CVS or drugstore and using the cuffs that they have at the pharmacy. And when you're there, take 2 readings just to be sure. Next, of course, is go to the doctors. The thing with that is there is something called white coat syndrome. Essentially, you just get anxious and your blood pressure rises just being in the doctor's office or being nervous about the readings that you'll get. And so that means that your readings might be a little bit higher than what they actually would be. And that's why the best way to measure this is at home. You can get a monitor like this one that I have that I bought from Amazon. It's like 30 bucks. It's easy, it's cheap, especially considering that it could save your life. And if you're testing this at home, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. No drinking, no eating, no exercise or caffeine or smoking before you take your readings. And take 2 readings on each arm just to be sure. And you should be doing this as frequently as needed, but once a week is a good baseline. The link to the monitor that I have and everything else that I mentioned in this video will be linked down in the description and in the pinned comments. And full transparency, I do get a small commission if you decide to pick up any of these things from the links down in the description. It's the same price for you. It's not more expensive. So I do appreciate your support. If you thought this video was helpful, I would love to hear from you down in the comments. Thank you for taking a little bit of time from your day, and I'll see you in the next one.